Welcome to Monday's Talk Solent. Very pleased to have you with us wherever you are in the area. And what a great bunch of guests I've got for you. I don't know how I do it for the money. And anyway, there's a theme running through today which may well be of interest to you. I hope so, because everything we do on this programme is of interest to many, many people. Now, the theme is really families and the law. And it's a subject which affects two of my guests in very different ways. Now, Emilie Holland is a solicitor for Abels in Southampton, and one of her specialities is family law. So we're going to be looking at the changes and developments in that area of law, and there are some coming hot off the presses, I'm told, today. Welcome also David Gates, who I'm told is known to his radio listeners as BD, his alter ego as I call it. But on a more serious note, David has written a very, very serious book, a heart-wrenching book for many, based on his own experiences in the family law field, really, called Access Denied, in which he tells of a nightmare of becoming a father and then discovering that the child was not his, and his life then with the law. My third guest is Steve Hastings, who's a UKIP councillor here in Portsmouth, and I'm looking forward very much to being able to tell you some of the things which have been released today from Mr Farage, from UKIP's manifesto for the election, and so that'll be very interesting. Big hot news for Talk Solent. And also, did you know that Nigel Farage's party, this is directed at you, Steve, got #1 in a survey as the most hated brand in Britain? Did you know that?
I wasn't aware of that until today, but the others won't be far behind.
There is little room for the Conservatives to gloat. They came in second, and this poll was only 1,500 people. Labour came in fifth, Liberal Democrats sixth, and they were pushed down the list by Marmite and Ryanair. So there we are. You didn't, perhaps not so ghastly, really.
Yeah, it's not so terrible.
But looking forward to hearing what your manifesto has to say in a moment. But if we could just start, Emilie, I think this family law thing is very, very interesting. Many people, through no fault of their own, as David's going to say, get dragged into it and come to your offices to talk about a split. And I know also one of your hot subjects is the difference between people who cohabit and people who marry legally. So we'll come to that in a second. But today, Resolution, which is a group of lawyers who deal with family law, have come up with some new stuff, haven't they, today?
Resolution is an organisation which family lawyers can join or be part of, which is a non-confrontational approach to family law, and they campaign for a conciliatory approach and also changes that need to be made. So the law for families is quite out of date, and they're campaigning for lots of things to change. But today they're up in London launching their own manifesto about the 6 major changes they want to make.
Right, and you picked one or two out, I think, that costs, is it, or what were you saying would be new?
Well, they want to remove blame in divorce.
Yep.
They want to come up with a children's charter, so when parents separate, there's a charter for the child as opposed to having to go through all of the current mediation and court routes as another option to help overcome difficulties. They want to change the situation for cohabitees.
Yeah, because
and other things.
Many people believe if they live together, buy a house, have some children, carry on perfectly normally, that things will be just the same as if they were married when they split up.
Yes.
Not so, is it?
No, I mean, they couldn't be more different. If you are married and then you separate and you get divorced, or even before divorce, there are far more options and automatic rights that you have. Whereas if you're a cohabitee, you really are left to your own devices. Apart from a couple of things that will help you, but it's much more difficult.
Much more difficult, and that's something I don't think people widely know. So family law, it seems to me one of the big changes is this idea of pushing people into mediation.
Yes.
Getting people to talk to each other about important things like their children, yeah?
Well, it's a requirement now before being able to go to court, unless you qualify for an exemption, you have to attend a MIAM, which is a mediation information appointment. There's public funding for it. It's a push for parents to talk to each other with the assistance of a mediator to try and resolve their differences that way, rather than shooting straight off to court and it becoming quite obviously.
So the judge will say automatically, will he have these people been through mediation?
The application will not even get to the judge.
Really?
Unless a mediator has signed it off that they've attended.
Right, so that's made a huge difference to
Definitely.
Your job as a lawyer, has it?
Oh, it's definitely, because we find a lot of people come to us for advice, and we're having to say to them, well, this is the advice, but the first thing you need to do is go and try this.
But your job is full of sadness, emotion, recrimination. It must be an awful job.
It's really hard, because it's not just explaining to them what the law is. There is full of emotion, and often it's very raw. It's when people have just separated, if we're talking about that aspect, and emotions are high, and it's very difficult for people to be as rational as they would be if they weren't going through it.
Yes, and of course it's painful because of children. I'll come to David in a moment, in fact, because it was very painful for you. Steve, what, just out of interest, what is UKIP's view on family life, families when they break up and all this? Are they in favour of mediation and such things?
Well, yes, of course. Yeah, I mean, I think you've got to have. I think this is brilliant, actually, the mediation, and of course, to date, all we've had is this. Everybody thinks that you're safe if you're cohabiting, and like you just said, with no knowledge of the law and what's going to happen to them. They can be the fathers. Well, we've had fathers for justice, of course, haven't we, and all the problems that go with that.
Yes. But I was wondering if they'd done any good, fathers for justice. They got some bad press and some good press.
Yes, they got a mix, and of course I think that's born out of desperation a lot of the time, isn't it? Which is the cause and effect of what happens. When they think they're safe, and then suddenly their whole world falls apart, and they don't have access. They're denied.
Yep.
Then they have to use other methods and what have you. They feel desperation.
It really is. And this leads us to David. Your book you've written called Access Denied, and shall I just there you go. And so anybody that wants to read this, it concerns, David, your relationship and the fact you had a daughter who we'll call Kelly, yeah? And when it broke up, well, I think I'd better get you to tell this story, because it wasn't straightforward, was it?
No, I mean, myself and the mother of the little girl concerned, we actually broke up not long after the child was born. But for the next 7.5 years, I was that child's dad in every respect. I had her at weekends and at holidays. I provided for her well-being and her keep and stuff. I paid money through the CSA and directly to the parent with care for those 7.5 years before I found out that she wasn't mine.
How did you find that out?
I found it out through conducting a DNA test, and I kind of was doing it for peace of mind more than anything else, but the results came back and were quite devastating, obviously.
So you had parental responsibility at that point?
That's right. I'd gone to court several years before to get parental responsibility, because the mother kept threatening me with lack of contact, usually over the row about money being provisioned for maintenance and stuff. So. And
you were paying the CSA when you split up?
Yes, I was. Or it was kind of, sometimes it was directly to the parents, sometimes it was through the CSA, depending on the arrangement that was made, but I was paying maintenance every month.
So you said to the CSA, but I've discovered to my horror this little girl is not mine, and they said?
Well, they wouldn't accept the evidence that I presented with them. They said I had to go through one of their approved DNA testing centres, but then they refused to give me a list of the DNA centres.
Yeah.
Crazy.
They were quite obstructive in a number of ways, and maladministrative in a lot of other ways as well, in my dealings with them.
So, sort of cutting on a bit, what happened? You lost touch with the little girl?
Yeah, because of the finding out, I didn't know what the best thing to do was in respect of looking after her, if you like. So I sort of, didn't have any contact with her while we sorted out the process with the court and that to get the proper DNA test done. And after going through all that process, which took about 7 months in all, I then tried to sort of reapply to sort of re-establish contact with the little girl, but the mother refused that. And basically, apart from a couple of chance meetings after that, I've not been able to have any contact.
It's the trouble, isn't it? Because you start from a perspective of an emotion, because that's when there's a child, the child's born, you've got the emotional connection. Then you've moved into a sort of access and financial arrangement, but that doesn't mean the emotion goes away, does it? You're still, no, that's in your head, isn't it?
For 7.5 years I loved her,
exactly,
and I was her dad. People tell me that I was actually quite a good dad as well. It was something I really enjoyed. And she was my world. There was nothing I wouldn't have done for her,
We'll come back, Emilie, I think in a minute. We must take a break in a second, but we'll come back and talk about fathers in this situation. I mean, yours was an unusual situation, a horrible one to find you weren't the father, but I think it's important to look at when you're not the father and when you are the father, and you're the person to ask. If you have any thoughts on this and you'd like to talk about anything, please get in touch with us here at That's Solent. Our programme is Talk Solent, but the email is talk@thatsolent.com. That's talk@thatsolent.com. And I look forward very much to hearing from you. And of course, later on in the programme, we will also be talking about the UKIP manifesto, because many of the details are coming in as we are broadcasting this. One big one concerning the NHS. Back with you in a minute. Hello and welcome back. I've got great guests, very interesting subjects coming out. Emilie Holland is a family lawyer. David Gates is a radio presenter and also written a book called Access Denied. And we've got Steve Hastings, of course, the UKIP councillor for Portsmouth. Now, before we went to the break, we were talking about this particular situation, David, you found yourself in. You wrote a book called Access Denied. You loved your daughter, you thought she was your daughter, but you found out she wasn't on a DNA test. And after that, the doors were pretty much shut to you, weren't they?
They were. I mean, hence the title of the book, Access Denied. I did try and establish contact again. I enjoyed being her dad. There was no reason why I wouldn't enjoy carrying that on. I think it was a difficult situation. When I first found out, I was not really emotionally ready for how to deal with that. There wasn't any kind of support mechanism for people in my position back then. There is a lot more support nowadays with groups and organisations around the country. So
I mean, she loved you.
Absolutely, yeah.
And presumably was devastated by this.
Yeah, I heard, from the school that she was getting into fights and stuff shortly afterwards, because she had a feeling that I was either dying or dead, and obviously that was very upsetting for her to sort of have that feeling, because suddenly I'm not seeing her anymore, and I don't think it was clearly explained to her why, or how do you explain that to a 7-year-old, what's going on. I did manage to see her in a supermarket shortly after that, and sort of was able to show her I wasn't dead or dying.
But in terms of legal access to her, it's not possible.
No, I mean, it was really down to the mother whether she granted any sort of access at all in that respect.
And she hasn't.
And I had, because of the certificate of non-parentage that the court granted me, I'd relinquished all the parental responsibility rights that I'd had.
Yes, yeah. Emilie, so have you had any cases like that?
Not with non-parentage really afterwards, personally. I'm sure many colleagues and peers and things have. But it's really frustrating, these sorts of things, because the court's paramount consideration is the child.
Yeah.
Now, of course, you wanted to see her, and that's your prerogative, but the court has to look at the child's best interests. And the fact that she's been having trouble, or you knew of trouble in school, and her thought process afterwards, how can that be in her best interest to feel like that without the correct explanation? It's not.
Would they have been open to mediation if this had happened now?
Well, you could apply for mediation, you could refer. It wouldn't have. It was something anybody can refer to mediation,
But
and it may assist.
If a mother decides under no circumstances is she going to allow her children to see their father, real father, stepfather, or whatever, is that still allowed these days?
It's not a unilateral right. There's no right for a mother to say no. But on a practical basis, the children, more often than not, mother's the primary carer, deals with the day-to-day. An absolute no, you cannot. But at the same time, then that's why mediation and the courts are there to then challenge it.
It's monstrous if a child wants to see the other parent. I mean, we live in a society where people marry, remarry, big families come of that, don't they? And people get close, Steve, don't they? You
Absolutely.
could get close, couldn't you, to someone who wasn't biologically any connection.
Absolutely.
And be told, sorry, you can't see that person anymore.
But it also works the other way round. You see, the effect on yourself, losing out on that contact with your daughter, where your daughter also has lost out on the contact with you. And if you're looking at the best interest of the child, you've got to look at that perspective as well, haven't you? And think what the cause and effect of that small person is going to be.
For me personally, it was what they term a living bereavement. You know, that's the best way to describe it. And I had counselling because I had this issue of trying to come to terms with the loss, if you like. You know,
and it's hard enough for you to handle, but imagine now
for a 7-year-old
child.
Yeah,
well, there's no understanding, is there?
I think
horrendous.
the difficulty you do have, though, is that because of all the extended family members and all sort of second families and families that are separated and then join with other separated families, is then you have all sorts of people involved with children. And then if you open the door to other people being able to have that contact, then you open the door to everybody.
But you were saying, I think in the Manifesto for Family Law, they're changing around grandparents and stuff. I mean, one of the things that was
a UKIP policy.
Right. So one of the things that was really interesting for me was the effect it had on my mum. You know, she was devastated at the loss of the little girl that she called her granddaughter. You know, and she still struggles with that now. And I think if there was some sort of provision made in law that, you know, those people could have access still.
Well, they can apply. Yeah, they can.
So you're a politician, Steve. You know, at what point do lawyers? What point does the government get involved and start making new laws? I mean, if families are changing so much.
Well, yes. I mean, it's government's responsibility, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the point, and it starts at the basis from stories like David's here and the effect on the child. Lawyers obviously get involved, but all of that has to come together, and information has to filter through to government to make decisions. And at the end of the day, we're all parents, we're all families. We have to look at the whole scene and try to make decisions that are right for everybody, and that's obviously different people have different opinions, but family to me is crucial. You know, you have to, and like you said, the law always looks at the child and looks for the betterment of the child. But as I was just saying, you know, sometimes that might mean that needs another piece of the jigsaw.
If you look at some care proceedings, though, so this is a completely different aspect. Your private law proceedings, but you have public law proceedings. If the court's considering the best interest of the child in that regard, they are sometimes much more open to the idea of children continuing to have contact with non-family members after the event. So there is a tension there, which is it's really strange that a different, you could see a step-parent or a family member that's not their biological relation, and sometimes that's encouraged.
Those are in care proceedings. You're saying it hasn't filtered through to family proceedings?
Private law proceedings.
Private law proceedings.
Yeah.
That is weird, isn't it? Why not? It's so important.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If you're thinking about the wishes and feelings of the children or the best interests of the children, her losing you will have had a profound impact.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And the awful thing is there's no one to say to you, but she still loves you. You know, because she almost certainly still loves you, you know.
Yeah, there was no reason for that to change, and I think that's why I had such an issue with it personally, you know, going through the bereavement of the loss was such a thing that I had to deal with, and that was one of the hardest parts coming to terms with. And
well, it's a very difficult thing, isn't it, where the law, I mean, what you do is dependent on what some elected representatives of Parliament decide. Yeah. And I wonder if sometimes that's the right system.
Well, you've got to have a system, and someone's got to make the decisions, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're always making them in the best way and the right. But that needs, and see, we have in general, as like social care, looked after children. There's been a lot of spotlight on, so you do that's developed better in many ways. And why shouldn't we open that whole viewpoint and thought process out to everybody else? You know, that it's just as important in your circumstance as it is a looked after child, really.
See, talking of parents, the big story in all our papers today is about these 3 young girls, 2 are 15, who have gone off, who may well be in Syria by now, but who left the United Kingdom happy homes, from all we can say. They saw something online on websites that encouraged them to go. Now I'm wondering, do you think the law, it is time, as this is becoming more common, should the law have something to say about websites that can be accessed by children like this?
I think you should. Yes, there comes a point, doesn't there?
I think everybody's answer would be yes, but it's how.
I think the issue is it depends what the website's doing. If it's soliciting hate, inciting hate and stuff like that, then I think there is a reason for taking control of that. But if you sort of start banning all websites just because they mention the word jihadi, then you're inflicting on free speech and stuff, which is what the Je suis Charlie Hebdo stuff was all about. It's a very sort of dodgy ground if you start restricting everyone in that respect.
Well, this inquiry today is also going to look at the police and intelligence agencies who let these girls go through passport control, book into flights on Turkish Airlines.
But one of them was only 15, is that right?
I think two. I
heard this morning that they used, or one of them certainly used their older sister's passport, so that's why they weren't stopped and controlled in immigration control and what have you. But of course this is such a big issue, isn't it? I mean, this is a massive worldwide issue now. How do you stop? You've got to ask also the question, what's the cause and effect? What in their minds was making them feel that was going to be a better life than where they are here?
And there must have been other influences. There can't have just been a website that
said,
go back to Syria.
One of their friends had already gone, allegedly. So she was saying, hey, this is wonderful, you're going to have a marvellous life.
Yeah, but you see, if they start from a point, if you've got a marvellous life going on here already, then someone's promising you another marvellous life. What is it about their life here that makes them think, well, there's got to be something? Or do we always think there's something better? Green grass is always greener.
Is it about exclusion? Do they feel excluded?
Well, that's possible. I don't know. I don't know.
I think the inquiry is too late.
Exactly.
The timing is ridiculous. Everybody needs to prevent them from going at all.
There's the Twitter. They've been talking about Twitter and blaming Twitter for not shutting things down and conversations and the rest of it. At the end of the day, that's just a tool, isn't it?
The internet is too big. I think
it's too big
manage 1, 2, 3 websites. Social media, how on earth could you... If they get shut off from one, they will move on to another.
But, they could have got that message from their church, they could have got their message from other friends.
Indeed. We don't know, but it will come out in the inquiry. I'm going to take a break. We're going to come back and talk about Mr Farage announcing how things are going to be better in our country after the election. See you then. Hi there, welcome back. Yes, very pleased. Great guests. Emilie Holland, a lawyer. David Gates has written a book, Access Denied. And Steve Hastings, a UKIP Portsmouth councillor. So, Steve, let's have a look at what Nigel Farage is saying this very day. Hot off the presses. Migrants should be banned from free NHS care for at least 5 years after their arrival in Britain.
Seems reasonable.
Well, you would say that, wouldn't you?
Well, yes. Well, considering if you look at the stresses and strains on the NHS, and you have run programmes, I think practically every day, have you not, talking about the NHS and the bed blocking and queues and all the rest of it, and troubles at A&E.
Your health spokesperson says it'll save $1 billion a year by cutting down on health tourism.
Yeah.
And I'm sure my lawyer's brain on the left here and David will pick this up very quickly, because I'm wondering what happens to these people. So they arrive in Britain and they get something wrong with them, so they ring 999 or go to their GP.
And they will be picked up, looked after in the same way as everybody else, but because they're part of their passport, they're coming into this country through immigration, they will have to have an insurance policy that goes alongside it, and that will pick up the cost rather than taxpayers of this country.
So who will this? So this will apply to whom? Anybody who's coming from the European Union?
Well, not currently, because we're
we're covered.
So
anyone else?
Anyone outside of the European Union, then they would have to have an insurance policy for that first 5 years. But we have an awful lot of. We're a national health service. We have a national health service, had it for forever, as far as I can recall. But we don't want it to be an international health service where people just come in for that purpose, come to use the NHS and
but if you
use our resources.
If you have your way, we'll be out of Europe anyway.
Absolutely, but
So
that's a
then what?
completely different issue. Now you're talking about the 100 days following the election where we were successful, but of course that hasn't happened yet, so we can't deal with that issue yet. But then we'd have a whole lot more money to spend, of course.
Yes, so you're referring to the drama documentary,
Yes, the
which was shown last week for anybody who didn't
lefty
see
propaganda. Yes.
Channel 4. Even I was surprised, she says, coming away from her middle stance, that they should actually deal with UKIP in a drama on television.
They didn't do it with the Greens or any other party,
No,
so
but they don't
why
fear the
zero in on
Greens.
UKIP?
They don't fear the Greens, they don't fear others. They fear UKIP, of course. Labour definitely fear UKIP. They keep shouting about it. In fact, that's all they ever talk about is... I was in Commercial Road last week with my wife, and some chap was shouting with a loudspeaker, stand up to UKIP. And I thought, stand up to you? Well, I did go over and talk to him and say, are you saying stand up for UKIP? And he did say again, no, it was to. And I said, but for what reason? And he was talking about NHS and all the rest of it, and so what we're going to do to the NHS.
People paint a very dangerous picture of UKIP.
Well, they do, and see, these people are provoking all sorts of dangerous thought processes in people's minds, and I think that's wrong, and they shouldn't be creating a programme of that nature with a very leftist propaganda type programme this close to an election. And I know in legislation that they're okay to do so at the moment, but I don't think that should be done. But
So,
if they do, then they must be afraid of us.
Right, now then, Emily, you apply your lawyer's brain to this one. Could that honestly work, banning migrants from the NHS for 5 years?
I just don't know how it's going to be policed or managed. If you phone 999, are they going to want to see your insurance document before they pick you up?
Well, what happens in America if same thing happens and you end up picked up and taken to...
Where's the money going to come from to manage the process that they have in other countries that run it like that? So money will save, will then be spent...
Well, it's an insurance policy. So if you've got an insurance policy for that first 5 years, once you're beyond the 5 years, of course, you become resident. You join the NHS like everybody else. But in that 5 year period, you keep up your insurance policy you would if you.
I don't mean that. I mean the checking process and the processing the people with their insurance before they come in. An actual organisation that's going to be needed.
For immigration, it's an immigration control, and of course.
But when you go on holiday now, immigration checks you've got travel insurance.
No, not now. No.
Immigration, I'm reminded, are currently under-resourced anyway. So you're going to give them another job to do.
Well, yes, and if it needs some sort of resourcing, if we're saving money for the NHS and we're saving, was it $1 billion?
$1 billion.
Yeah. Well,
I think
then we can afford some more immigration officers, for sure.
There are people that obviously do abuse the system, and if we can cut those people, then it's got to be a good thing. But it's how who are cut and in the right way.
Yes.
Yeah, you'd have to put a process in place and it would have to work, of course. But at the end of the day, I think you'd have to have a fail-safe scenario. And what you're talking about, for instance, if somebody was ill on the street, run over or whatever, and we've taken them to NHS, we're still going to take them, and NHS staff would still look after them. There's no way. Our NHS staff, our doctors and nurses in this country, are the finest in the world, and they would deal with them and look after them.
You see, one thing that's been levelled at UKIP is you're not a very kind party.
Oh, really?
Yes, apart from being
I'm
racist.
very kind.
And
apart from
being racist, that's often a word that...
Well, now you see, you've hit a nail on the head there, you see, because in that very programme last night that they were showing all about our office in Thanet, and the person that said some wrong things, and I have to agree, the lady that said those things, they were very wrong, and in the modern world they should not be said. Well, the action that we took was not a racist action, it was an anti-racist action, and she was stripped from the party immediately. Now you have to ask the question, how many other parties, and other parties do have their racists, their fair share, the Conservatives, Labour, Lib Dems, but how soon do they cut and get rid of them?
What about these illegal immigrants? So people coming in boatloads or arriving at Calais, they're not. One of them has a heart attack. What are you going to do with them? They're not going to be able to qualify.
Well, well, of course, under those sorts of circumstances. Well, I don't know at this stage if that person could well be an asylum seeker. Now that's a completely different thing. I totally support asylum seekers if they are genuine asylum seekers.
But you haven't got time to establish all that because they're having a heart attack.
You're still going to treat them in the same way as you would treat anybody. You deal with the paperwork afterwards and you decide.
I think Emilie's right. The policing of it is going to be a nightmare. And,
yes.
So it's basically, though, if you've got something which comes on later and slower, you're going to have your own policy. But if you keel over, you'll get looked after. I don't quite see...
Quite.
Well, obviously, and you'd have to put all this together. That's once it's been stated as a policy, and that's what we want to do. How you make it work and how you police it, etc. You have to put all those building blocks in place when you have the opportunity.
Right. Well, keep watching, won't you? Because that Solent will bring you all Mr. Farage's news as he says it. But he's definitely not bringing in privatisation in the NHS.
Absolutely no way. And I know that was stated back in 2010, I believe it was, where Nigel did think along those lines potentially, but it was only a discussion potentially. Having had many discussions since within the party, it's been absolutely and totally concluded, no way, it will remain free at the point of delivery and paid for out by taxes.
All right, now, so of course, because May the 7th is getting closer and closer, they're all at it, aren't you all? David Cameron is at it. Universal benefits for pensioners will once again be protected if Conservatives win. That means that however much money you may have, even if it's £1 billion, you'll still get your bus pass, your TV licence and your winter fuel allowance.
Isn't that
David,
lovely?
sound reasonable?
It depends where you live, because there's a lot of people living in Spain that claim that.
Yes.
So, I think if you don't live in this country, then you shouldn't be able to claim the benefits that are associated with it.
Yes, they're kicking up about that, aren't they? Saying we have cold winters in Spain, I've read, yes. But what do you think that is reasonable? He's saying they're a treat, they're a reward for all the money you've paid in.
I think absolutely they should get them.
Right, even if they're very rich.
You've worked very hard through your whole life. If a benefit shouldn't be given to you because...
Is it fair?
Because you haven't.
Steve?
Well, I think it's electioneering, but then it would be, of course, this close to an election. The Conservatives would say things like that's where their votes are coming from, and I think that's fair and reasonable for them to do.
Is it a benefit that's claimed, or is it a benefit that's automatically given? If it's benefits that's claimed, then the rich people can make a decision whether to claim it or not.
Well,
and then it becomes a moral
someone
issue.
was commenting on
Yes.
that this very day, saying we've tried to give it back, but they don't want it back. We live in a world where you can't give back your benefits.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
which
That's
crazy.
really strange.
That's
So-
crazy.
Yes, somebody actually tried it, and they
Yeah.
said, "I'm sorry, you can't."
Well, I think
No.
that's ludicrous, and of course if someone wants to give up their benefit, they should be allowed to do so, and they should even be able to nominate where they want it to go. If they want it to go to NHS, that'd be lovely.
Well, that's interesting thought, isn't it? Or a charity or the
It's their choice,
NHS.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So we're not very, very keen on that. Well, it's all going to become much clearer as we head towards the election. So if you were an MP, Emilie, what if you were in a particular party, we won't ask which one, but what would you want to see changed?
Me personally, in my job, I think legal aid needs a lot of attention. It was slashed too heavily, and we are not just practitioners, but the people of Southampton, Portsmouth, across the country are suffering as a result, and I think that needs big attention.
Right, so a lot of people cannot get it for things they got it for before.
Yeah, I think cuts were not necessarily a terrible idea, but they've gone too far.
Right.
We need to come back a little, relax a little.
So, yes, right, we're running out of time. Criminals get it, do they? Or civil cases? Or both?
I personally don't do crime,
No.
but in family it's difficult.
Right, the clock is
Definitely.
ticking, so I can't ask you, but that's an interesting one. So thank you very much, panel, and we'll get you all back again. And if you have any comments to make on some very thorny subjects we've tackled today, please let us know at talk@thatsolent.com. And we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye for now.